reminds me of
Or like Hobbes.
I don't know if you've seen The Good Place, like
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah.
There's like a joke. I think it's in the first episode. I haven't watched much of the show, but I've seen this episode where they're like plenty of religion have tried to guess like what actually the nature of the afterlife is, and they're like, yeah, most people are like 2%, 3% correct, except this one guy on shrooms is like 89% correct.
He got it right.
And that's like, I don't know, it's obviously not true to how it is probably, but like in my head that's like every like economic theory and like a theory of history is like almost like 2 to 3% right, but like when someone gets really high they can get like astoundingly close. There's one guy out there who has this like crackpot theory
about
that's
how
actually like the closest to the truth.
I actually, speaking of drugs, I watched the episode where they come up with the conspiracy theory of the Milo Rossi episode where they come up with the conspiracy theory about the Bass Pro Shop pyramid.
Oh, nice.
Where they get like that. I was like, I have to try that. I have to come up with my, because you know like those grand theories of history like Jared Diamond and all that. They're always like derided. I'm gonna do that one day. I'm gonna sit down and just write like a grand theory of history.
No, you should. It definitely. I think that would be fun.
It's gonna be awful, but
well, that's the point, isn't it? Like and plus, you don't have to make it awful. You know, you can make it compelling, and then you spin it off into a fiction book about like one of those like secret histories books or something. You know, this is the foundation of a $1 million franchise. Yeah, that's how you get started.
They use ChatGPT to find like all the information about it because they want to be intentionally like wrong. So like, how much did it cost to build everything? And then have you seen that? Like,
I've only seen like part of it. I just know that it exists. I told you to watch it because I thought you'd like it.
Funny.
But I haven't.
And they're just off camera because they don't want to get demonetized. You see him hitting the bong and he comes up and it's like,
that's also what I remember. Like is him them like the hitting the bong off screen.
And it's like, oh, ritual purposes. Oh, Jesus.
The almighty reason. It's ritual purposes.
Archaeologists love ritual purposes. Everything you don't know what it's for.
You will learn to love ritual purposes as an aspiring archaeologist.
If you don't know what it is, it was for ritual. It's definitely didn't have a practical use. No, it's for ritual.
No. Yeah, I think we'll probably start the cold open there. How have you been?
Pretty good. You?
I'm good. I was on my feet all day, so I'm a bit tired, but it's nice to sit down and talk to you instead of collecting data off observations for a cities class. So I can learn more about urbanism and land use, even though it's very important.
It's kind of relevant to today's topic, actually, land use. It's a big point of contention in Rome.
Is it now? Yeah. We're talking about Rome. I see. Well, welcome to the... I guess we'll call it... I don't know. I was thinking we'd call it isn't the We Weren't There podcast?
It's the We Weren't There podcast.
Yeah, the We Weren't There podcast, hosted by... I think I'll just say Ben. I'm not going to
YouTube handle.
Yeah. I'm not going to do the YouTube handle thing. I'm one of your hosts, Ben.
And I'm your other host, Max.
And I've heard through the grapevine that you're going to be telling us a story. Or many stories, I guess.
Kind of one story. It's about a man named Tiberius Gracchus, who... well, we'll get to him. I had a kind of idea.
You have the context
sort of to set the scene of where we are. And so basically he's a Roman figure. And the story kind of starts like right as Rome becomes like the hegemon of the Mediterranean, right? Mm-hmm. So we're starting kind of after the Third Punic War, so that's 143 BC, and then there's the conquest of Macedon, which is 148.
Right.
So after that, there's no peer militarily, at least, to Rome in the Mediterranean. They're kind of unrivaled.
Right.
And after these huge conquests, now we see some problems start to develop, and the cracks start to show in the Republican system.
You're telling me it's not a perfect system of government?
No. Surprisingly, yeah, it's really not. So following these huge conquests, right, you find all these soldiers coming home, and they're coming back to a society now that has, as far as the Romans can tell, way less people in the rural population and far more poor urban people migrating to Rome looking for work, right? Like there's all these poor people who have no land and are looking to do wage work in Rome. So this massive...
Doesn't sound familiar at all.
No. And this massive poor is going to become a very, very important political body in Rome from this point on. They kind of always exist after this. So there's a few explanations for why this happened, right? The like classic in the sense that Roman historians describe it as this, and it was the mainline view for quite a long time, I would say until the 60s or 70s. It's only recent.
A lot of trust on those classical authors, eh?
Yeah, and a guy's writing like 200... Like the source on Tiberius were written by... anyways, 200 years after the fact, or more than 200 years, in 200 AD. So, this is...
Close enough.
He's doing most of his political stuff in the year 133 BC. So, 300 years later, the guy's writing about it. So, the classical explanation of why this happens is that there was an increasing concentration as time went on of land into the hands of wealthy Romans who would create these huge estates. They call them latifundia, right? It's like almost like a plantation. And it was staffed with slave labor, which is important hence no
Very
jobs.
much like a plantation.
So there's no jobs anymore, right? And the idea is that because all these soldiers went off to war and they couldn't maintain their land, it would go like fallow, basically. And they'd come back and they couldn't afford to start it again, so they just sell it to the first guy who came by and they'd like amass land, right?
Right.
The archaeological evidence really doesn't support this. It is, however, important to note that Romans of the time also believed this is why this was happening. And we'll get to why. That's really interesting.
I mean, it's important to know the rhetoric at the time, right?
Yeah, and
it
like
kind of
even,
informs the political developments.
Like even the Romans in 133 BC would have believed this is why they're broke now. This is why they're poor.
Right.
But newer research suggests that, in fact, and this is really interesting. So Romans, I got to go a little aside, but the Roman censuses, right, are self-reported. So you got to go up to the guy.
Self-report?
Yeah. Among Us? No, you've got to self-report yourself to the censor. And there was a lot of small rural farmers around this time who started avoiding declaring themselves on the census because nowadays, in this time of Rome, so the glory days of Rome, if you will, like of military conquest and the Second Punic War and like the, those wars, there was a lot of loot to be had. The military was a very profitable enterprise. Nowadays, they're fighting like the remnants of Carthage, and like at this point, after they beat Carthage, especially after they beat Macedon, they're fighting like Celtic tribes in the north, and there's nothing to loot.
Celtic tribes?
Yeah, and there's
I'm just talking about the like, Boston basketball team.
Sorry, I always confuse it, but in Cisalpine Gaul, like
yeah.
And they're which is like Switzerland today, and there's much less to loot. There's a lot of material wealth. So people,
it's not as much of a trading civilization, right?
Yeah,
it's a bunch of people who, I mean, yeah, I guess I don't have really much to add to that. It does make sense though, yeah. And
it's also a wildly unpopular war because they keep losing. So people start avoiding because you can't be conscripted if you're not on the census rolls, right? So and there's also the side effect of you don't really pay taxes if you're not on the census roll.
I mean, if you're not on the census roll, are you like giving up your rights as a citizen, or how does that work?
Yes, but for most rural farmers,
from that mostly, like especially I can imagine for a rural farmer, for like especially like sustenance farmers, it's
because they're farming for themselves, and your citizenship, like most of these guys couldn't afford to travel to Rome to vote.
Social security isn't exactly a thing.
Yeah, you had a lot of kids. That was your social security.
Right, that was the safety net.
You couldn't travel to Rome to vote anyways because you were too poor and you couldn't leave the farm. So really that's one of your civic rights that you're never exercising anyways. And your rights towards the law, yes, but most like for them the pros outweighed the cons basically. And they could always go the next year and declare themselves, like there's nothing stopping you from going back.
Imagine, is it illegal to not declare yourself on the census, or could they just not? And
I actually don't know, but I guess you could probably make an argument that you were like working or something. I really don't know if it's illegal. That's something to look into.
Yeah, especially if they do it the next year, though. Like, if there's an inconsistency, they're like, "Oh, were you born like today? Yeah. Like, how have you not existed until now?" Although, I imagine if they're conquering a bunch of territory, like, I guess it's not weird to have a bunch of different names suddenly pop up on a census.
Mind you, they only did census of Roman citizens, though.
Oh, right. Yes,
they didn't bother with even the Italian allies. You had to be like a Roman.
Right. Okay. So that explains that.
Yep. So this combined with there's some archaeological data as well. They do a lot of work on like the types of houses and the types of farms, and you can see that. In certain areas, I will give you, particularly very close to Rome, the Latifundia were getting much bigger, but that's a phenomenon that actually just happened, but much later, like towards the end of the 1st century BC.
Right.
But further out, where most of these rural farmers are, you see it's still smallholding land, but there's this really interesting phenomena as well. In addition to the fact that these people are evading conscription, there's a big reduction in military deaths in these wars. Like the Punic Wars, a lot of people died in the Second Punic War, right?
Yeah, famously.
But in the Third Punic War and the Macedonian Wars, and the fact that both of those wars ended meant there was a lot less military death. And Roman society is kind of structured around perpetual war that kills off a lot of the male population.
Jesus Christ!
Because they have their laws. It's not like primogeniture. Like all your land doesn't go to your oldest son. It's divided equally amongst your male kids.
Yeah.
So if your 3 sons survive, whereas only one of them would in the past, you have to divide your land amongst them, and eventually it gets so small that it's practically worthless for farming,
right? Which
forces them to go to the city searching work, which is actually why there was such an influx of urban poor.
Interesting. And especially if you're a farmer that has a bunch of kids for the sake of farm work, and there's not as much death, then yeah, that makes sense. The natural result would be like you can't do much with it, and so you'd sell it. So it's the lack of war or the lack of deaths from war that might have actually caused it.
Yeah, because the armies were smaller, which meant less disease, and there was just less war after they beat the Macedonians and the Punic. They were just fighting in the Cisalpine, and there was not nearly as large a force needed for that. And people were evading conscription.
Yeah. So
it's kind of but it's really interesting because they would have perceived this problem as a problem of underpopulation almost. Because as far as they could tell, and the authorities in Rome thought that the population in Italy was stagnating. But if you look at it, because they're lying on the census, it's actually growing, which means there's just not enough land in Italy left.
Huh.
Because all the land is either in the hands of a bunch of like small farm, like really increasingly smaller farm like landowners, the latifundia near Rome, so the wealthy Romans, or Italian allies around like the cities. But nonetheless, the result is the same. Lots of urban poor and like kind of destitute people going to Rome, and they're very angry, right?
Right.
And into this kind of situation comes Tiberius Gracchus. So he's born to a really prominent Roman family in 163 BC. His father was actually a consul and celebrated 2 triumphs, so nothing to scoff at. And his mother was the daughter of Scipio Africanus, so he comes from quite a hefty lineage. Who's also
almost royalty.
Yeah, and he fights under Scipio Africanus in the Punic War. He's supposedly at the siege of Carthage and supposedly one of the first over the walls. I say supposedly.
Damn, he's everywhere, huh?
Yeah,
the Forrest Gump of his day.
So he is really firmly planted in the ranks of Roman aristocracy. He's from like a...
He's known.
Yeah, like I know because he will later position himself as like a man of the people, but whether or not that's true, he does come from substantial wealth and prestige in Roman society.
Right.
But more importantly than his fighting in the Punic War is fighting in the Numantine Wars. So that's in Spain. They're fighting the Numidians. And that was in 137 BC. He was fighting there, and that's when he became a quaestor. So that's a military rank underneath the consul, just underneath the consul.
Quaestor.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how you.
My
Latin's not perfect.
I think I've just heard it pronounced so many different ways. I have no idea what the correct way is. So quaestor.
I guess so.
I don't know.
It's spelled Quaestor.
Oh, I mean like quaestor.
Quaestor. Anyways, it's the
Whatever.
rank underneath.
Yeah,
consul. So he's by this point he's doing the traditional Roman thing of making your name in the military to eventually get into politics. And he makes his name big in the Numidian War, or the Numantine War, sorry, because he's at this big battle, right? His consul has like got them surrounded by the Numidians. And because these people respect Scipio Africanus, because they fought alongside him against... I'm not sure about this.
I mean, the Numidian cavalry were like mercenaries, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they fought alongside him against Hannibal. Way back in the day.
I've heard them both on the Punic side and on the Roman side. Sorry, the Carthaginian side.
Because they did specifically ask for him. So this particular general here had an affinity for Tiberius because he was descendant of Scipio Africanus.
Makes sense.
So he goes out.
Clearly that genius is in his blood.
Clearly. He goes out and he negotiates. He manages to get them all peacefully withdrawn from Spain without anyone being killed or enslaved. But he goes back. The Senate's pissed about this because it's like, looks bad for them. So they actually send the consul back in chains and said, you have him. We don't want him. But they let the soldiers stay. So nonetheless, he kind of makes a name for himself by doing that.
Nice.
Following his military service, he comes back to Rome. And in 133, this is kind of when he gets into politics big time. He does kind of a weird thing. Aristocracy doesn't really go for the tribune role because the tribune is traditionally a representative.
Right, tribune of the plebs.
Yeah, so a pleb. But he runs for it anyways. He runs in 133 BC, and he runs by campaigning on an issue, which is really weird in Rome because people campaign on their reputations, on their families, and on their character. They don't really campaign on, I'm going to do this if you elect me.
Wow.
So he campaigns on redistribution of ager plebis, which is public land, basically.
Interesting.
Because he subscribes to that first explanation. Because he's seen the census
rolls. The one that's commonly accepted, the one about
the latifundia and the wealthy Romans buying up all the land.
Yeah, especially from soldiers. So people who fought for the empire or the republic. Sorry. And
it's important to note they haven't actually redistributed public lands in 30 years because that was a process which took place in Italy because they didn't do overseas colonies of soldiers yet. That's that's way later an invention.
Right.
But by now they had conquered all of Italy, so they hadn't done any redistribution. So what he doesn't really mention, but does become a problem, is that this necessitates taking land from Italian allies, like redrawing the boundaries of what's considered Roman land,
which can cause some
the social war.
Much resentment.
Much later, this comes to a head, and Italian citizenship becomes a big deal later on, but not
that's later.
Not
that's later.
Time. So yeah, he's elected tribune. And he campaigns on that, the redistribution, and he's elected primarily, as you might imagine, by the mass of urban poor who are quite angry at their situation.
Yeah, the people who are like, you're telling me that it's their fault that we don't have land? Well, especially if they're promising to redistribute land for the sake of the urban poor, I'd imagine as well.
Yes, and it's even, their vote actually counts for more in a way, because the Romans, I don't want to call it an electoral college. It's kind of like that. So they're divided into voting tribes, and your tribe has one vote. So say I'm
tribe.
They just call them tribes because it's based on an ancient distinction, but it has more to do with where you live. So in Rome, there's a certain number of tribes per
So is it geographic or?
Yeah.
Okay, geographic.
Depending on where you live in Rome and whatever.
Okay.
And each of those tribes has one overall vote towards a candidate. So if 51% of the people vote, it's basically like a first past the post type system.
Right.
But there's more of them in Rome And they don't create new ones. It's like a whole thing. So like even if the rural population skyrockets, if you're not in Rome, your vote's still like the rural people still will always be outnumbered in votes by the Romans just because there's more of those electoral divisions, like more tribes in Rome.
Right.
So by having all these urban poor arrive and join all these, they have an outsized influence. And he had a fair bit of support from the Senate. They call it the Claudian faction.
The Claudians.
And one of the consuls, because Scipio Africanus, who's consul right now, is off fighting a war. I don't remember who. So he's not in town. So the other consul's actively supporting him. So he wins in like a landslide. It's like not even a question. And the guy who supports him, his name is Scaevola. It becomes important later on.
Scaevola.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep that in mind.
Scipio Africanus is off on campaign.
Okay, so he's not there.
And then rural poor entered the city. They vote for Tiberius. And actually, people come from the rural countryside to vote for him.
Oh.
Which is quite rare because, again, it's quite costly to leave your farm.
Makes sense.
But there are people, and this is where the consul is important. Because the Senate hates when this happens. Because it causes so much unrest. Because they don't have the facilities to support all these rural poor coming in for votes.
Right.
So they do their best to just dissuade people. But because one of the consuls is supporting it, they manage to like let them all anyways.
Right.
Yeah. And then so importantly, Tiberius, while campaigning, believes that the issues facing Rome were caused by a problem of the distribution of land, right? When in reality, like we talked about before, it's more about a lack of land. There's just no land in Italy left now. There's an overpopulation.
So it's an overpopulation issue, but he makes it seem like
like all the wealthy have all the land. There's enough for everyone. When really, it's just there's too many Romans now, and they won't found over.
I imagine both could be true at the same time.
To a degree, yeah. It's just that it's really exaggerated to the level of concentration. There's still a lot of
right. I mean, he's making it sound like the one solution is to immediately redistribute land, and then all the problems would be solved.
Yeah. Also, land that belongs to people right now. Like he makes it sound like it's just fallow land, but it's.
I mean, it says public land, right?
It's public land. Well, he wants to redistribute land in the same kind of same kind of scheme as they would have before, but they have nothing left to conquer. So he's redistributing land that's functionally like Italian land now.
Okay, so it's like dispossessing citizens. Well, Italians.
Non-citizens. That's the important part. He's dispossessing.
So dispossessing Italian non-citizens.
When I say Italian allies, I mean all the cities because there's a lot of cities in the Italian peninsula who aren't Roman citizens.
Right.
They call them Italian allies. They have a status that's like above. There's like goes Roman citizen,
right? It's a class system,
and then like non-citizen, like barbarian, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Like
people who had to be conquered.
Yeah, because those Italian allies usually aided in the conquest of Italy. That was kind of the reward. Yeah. So they do have some legal rights, and a lot of them do become Roman citizens. The wealthy of them.
Right. I mean, eventually they all do.
Yeah, later on, but like even now, it can be kind of bought with wealth and influence. But the average Italian ally isn't
for $5 million.
Yeah. So yeah, lack of land, but it's really the distribution of land, and this is arguably not his fault. All the data he has access to is the census in which people lied. So to him,
mean, at the same time, does it really matter, right? I mean, like
it doesn't matter, but it helps explain his motivation because, like,
I mean, with like that's the ultimate question, right? Is he being genuine about wanting to fix this issue and that being the solution to the issue, or is it a way to gain power? And I mean, I'm sure he wants to do things for the state, for the people of Rome, but is it to a means to an end, or is it really his end?
You know, if you want, actually, at the end we can have that debate because that's debated in academia. All
right, and then we'll get to that later. I guess I'm getting that too early.
Because I want to give you the whole story, and then I want your opinion on that because it's debated very heavily in academia, that kind of thing. And some people, and
I'm sure both of us are well equipped to.
Well, after this, hopefully you'll be well enough
long debated question,
and I can answer any questions. So underreporting population. So he thinks the population's stagnant. Mm-hmm. Well, most of Romans think this. So while he's tribune, he proposes a piece of legislation known as the Lex Agria, which is the redistribution of public lands.
Okay.
Put into law.
He's actually doing what he promised.
I know.
Wow.
Shocking. I'm going to briefly explain Roman legislation. It's so complicated, and I'm just going to do like the Cliff Notes version because it matters.
All right.
So basically, legally, what you have to do legally and what you have to do traditionally are very distinct. They have a name.
Sounds like a great way to justify not following the law.
Yeah, we'll get to that. It's called the Mos Maiorum, which is the law of the ancestors. So it's like the traditional body of law that's not written anywhere, but everyone at this point mostly respects and believes is like the law. But it's not crucially, it's not written anywhere. It's not. There's no law that says it, but it's just common. It's like common sense.
Right. There's no written document where that has to be enforced.
And typically, what the tribune, because anyone can, like a senate or like a senator or whatever, can propose legislation. Mm-hmm. So when you propose legislation, typically it goes to the Senate, it's approved by the Senate, and then it goes down to the assembly where it's voted on by all the people of Rome.
Okay.
That's the kind of democratic element of there. Because, the whole, I think it's Polybius who says they're part monarchy, part democracy, part oligarchy. Because the oligarchy is the Senate, the king, the monarchy is the consuls, and the democracy is the assembly.
Okay.
And as tradition goes, you present it to the Senate, they present the assembly where it's voted on.
Mm-hmm.
So they have this long, lengthy debate about the bills. There's lots of passionate speeches and whatnot. You know how that kind of goes.
The way democracy goes.
And when it's written in, when Plutarch writes about their lives, we don't know what they said, but he gives them long-winded speeches about like equality and the nature, and uses them to moralize. But sufficient to say there was a lot of debate. This was like, as you can imagine, a lot of senators particularly didn't agree with this, other than his like branch of the Claudian faction,
right?
Which were still like a pretty substantial force, but there was a big opposition as well to this. It wasn't.
I find it interesting because I imagine most of the Senate were like aristocrats, right? That's what you're explaining earlier. So
they're all aristocrats. Well,
they're all
right now. They're all aristocrats. Yeah,
okay.
At this point in history, they're all very wealthy, which is really funny because they actually can't own business when they're
right.
But they do still make a lot of money through
land ownership mostly, right?
Yeah, and also what amounts to basically shell corporations, but it's another. I'll talk about that.
That's another discussion.
Yeah, it's really funny how they manage to make a lot of money even though they're not really supposed to own business when they're, because it's a conflict of interest.
Right. That's funny how they recognize that early on.
It is interesting though. That's what I love about the Roman Republic is so interesting is that in many ways it's strikingly modern, and then there's other ways where you're going to see it's very much emblematic of ancient history.
People are people, so
yeah,
it's easy to forget that, but we really shouldn't. But right. The Claudian faction, I imagine, is a substantial bunch. It's not the majority, though, right?
No, but because there's 300 senators, and I don't remember exactly how many. We don't really know, but they're substantial enough to be mentioned, and one of them is a consul, which is
okay, that's a pretty big deal. But that's why I find it interesting that those people would be into the redistribution of land.
Well, it's mostly because they're tired of the urban poor. Like they view this as a real problem,
right? It's a way to get rid of the urban poor from the cities,
which are disaffected and angry, and they're worried they may, revolt or something. So to them, this is a solution to a dangerous problem.
I see.
It's just that the other senators think there's other ways.
So it's like a social engineering thing more than well, engineering, but like not social control, but like a social redistribution, like a moving people, a large population of people who are a risk to the state to somewhere else where they're no longer a risk to the state.
Well, also the fact that they're a risk to the state because they're poor, which presumably if you gave them land and all went well, most of them would no longer be poor and would be grateful to the faction that gave them said land, which is a big thing in Roman politics. I could do a whole episode on Roman politics. It's very complex. But
this is kind of what you're doing now.
I'll get to
many.
I'll do it a little side just because I find this interesting. The whole concept of patron-client relations in Rome. So you're sort of indebted to whoever you work for or like provides for your family, basically.
That's what my boss keeps telling me.
And
I'm just kidding.
As a result, like all these people who would now be indebted to this faction would necessarily, they don't have to, but it's tradition indicates that they would vote for those people in the elections. So it's also a way of securing like political power.
Okay.
Because now they're like supposed to be grateful and vote for you, but it's not even a level of they want to. It's like almost like an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that's an interesting aside. So that might be a motivation if you wanted to speculate. It could be that. Could also be they wanted to get rid of the urban poor.
I'm sure that it's another situation where many among them probably had many different reasons.
Yeah,
including those.
And the traditional outlet for this sort of problem, which had happened in the past, was just to found new cities. But again, as we've talked about before, it's overpopulated in Italy. There's nowhere for new cities.
Right. There's no new land. That's the whole
issue
problem. To begin with.
There's no land, and they don't do overseas colonies yet, because at some point they will decide to just
that is the solution to their problem. Then it would be overseas colonies. Because I do hear a lot like, it's like Trajan and like his dynasty originate from like a city in Spain that was like a place for veterans to be settled. So I imagine then that would become their solution would be to
yeah, and the key part of that is right now I think I don't even know if it's like chauvinism or why they won't do it. Like is it just that they think that those lands are like I really don't know why they wouldn't found colonies overseas.
Imagine if you haven't done it before.
Maybe there's just no one who's innovative enough to go, what if we went over the water?
The Greeks did it, so it's like they have an example somewhere else, but maybe they had an issue with.
But I think a lot of it's also cultural. Like, do you really want to leave your Italy behind? Like your whole life is there,
right?
Like,
but
would they be able to convince people that going to live in North Africa, for example, which is where Marius sets up a colony of veterans, or like,
right
in Spain?
Yeah, I just find it interesting that that's not the solution being proposed, right? Because then there is a problem where that is a potential solution. But I guess if you think that there is enough land And the problem is distribution, not the fact that there isn't enough land.
That's true, because they don't know what we know. They think that they think there's enough land.
Okay.
So there's it's that.
I mean, that makes sense then. In the conception of the people at the time, that is the solution to the problem. Colonies aren't necessary. You wouldn't need to leave home. You wouldn't need to leave
if you just like
Italy. If you just do this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, there's lengthy debates about this bill, and eventually, through some prodding by the Senate, we'll just call them, I don't know if they have a name, they probably do, but the opposing faction to Tiberius and the Claudians,
right?
They prod one of the 12 other tribunes, his name's Octavian, no relation.
Got it. That happens very often, doesn't it?
Well, there's only like 12 male Roman names, but to veto the bill. And tribune vetoes are absolute. There's no getting around a tribune veto. You got to convince the guy to rescind his veto if you want him. And there's 12 of these guys. And
can you threaten the guy?
Well, not legal. Well, no, not really. And you can't prosecute them either, because becomes important later. But anytime you're in a political office in Rome, you're immune from prosecution until you leave. Mm-hmm. But their terms are really short. They're elected on a yearly basis.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
But again, this becomes important later. So he's removed. So they veto the bill.
Mm-hmm.
So Tiberius, he goes and he pleads to the Senate, like, please have him rescind his veto. He tries to make his case. There's just not enough senators to support him. He holds fast with the veto, Octavian. So then he decides to go against traditional Roman law and do something that, technically is illegal. There's nothing saying you can't do this.
It's the tradition thing, right?
It goes very much against the most minorum of the law of the ancestors, the unwritten body of law that, like, let's say until now has been almost entirely respected. There's like 1 or 2 cases of people being elected consul.
But it only takes one.
During wartime, as
all things get stretched during wartime. Doing it, I mean, I imagine this is during a peacetime though, right?
Yes.
So that's why it's like very unprecedented.
Yeah, and it's also never happened. Like, what he's about to do is, you'll see, quite radical.
Okay.
He decides, because he's really popular. He's mobilizing the masses. He's like almost like the original populist, if you want. He, like, people love this guy.
The OG, the OP.
He like appeals to urban poor, and like it or not, there's the implicit threat that these people are in the city, and there's a lot more of them than there are senators, and they're very angry. So
sounds like a threat.
He bypasses the Senate. Which, again, not actually legal, but has never been done. Never in recorded history in Rome has ever been done.
Right.
And he goes to the assembly, which is, where the actual laws are passed, if you will. And he says they have the right to recall tribunes.
Oh, okay. So that's a potential solution.
Well, I should say there's no law saying. I should say there's, because you can do anything in Roman law, but there's no law saying. There's no law saying they can't recall tribunes. It had never been done.
Okay, but if there's no one saying that it can't be done, then it can't be done.
So he says, okay, we're going to have a vote to remove Octavian from his office. So they vote. And because he's wildly popular, they remove Octavian. His justification for this, which does not go over well even with a lot of the urban poor, this is, they're starting to see.
Seems sketchy.
Well, because this is when the rumors start that he wants to make himself a tyrant, he's going to mobilize the masses and, become king of Rome, which king is such a dirty word in Rome. Say what you will about the aristocracy, they hate the idea of one guy ruling over them. They think it just should be like a wealthy elite, but not one guy. So this is when that rumor starts. Even the average Roman that goes so hard against their cultural values, he starts to lose a little support. But his justification is that, if a tribune who's a representative of the people no longer represents the will of the people have the right to remove that tribune. And I've decided he doesn't have the interest of the people in mind anymore, so we should put it to vote.
Okay.
So they remove him. And
so as representative of the people, he decides that the other representative of the people no longer represents the people, and therefore should no longer represent the people.
What I always wonder is, could he technically not veto his own removal? I know one would respect it, of course, but
I mean, is there anything saying you can't do that?
No, and this is just the beginning. Tiberius... I mean,
if you can veto any decision, then you can veto the decision.
Oh, they do that. Not in Tiberius, but later on, it gets to the point where they veto each other's vetoes, and it never ends, and they have to it's. One of them.
That sounds like the beginning.
It's the beginning. Rumbling. It's the rumbling, because when you get later on, there's a whole situation where I think it's a senator, because they have power of purse, just locks the treasury doors and refuses to open them. No state expenses until what he wants gets passed. It's
wow. Okay. Well, holding the state hostage is a very interesting way to get the things you want.
So yeah, it's wildly unpopular among the senators, and quite unpopular amongst the average Roman. They see this as
I mean, if someone speaks for you vote people to speak for you, right? But then the other person who was voted to speak for you makes the other guy who also was voted to speak for you and claims that he wasn't he's speaking for you. It becomes like a whole mess of like, and I'm sure even people then could recognize like, this seems like it could go a very bad direction.
Yeah, and
I'm sure the people, plenty of people care about stability, right? Like the whole argument of like, oh, well, people actually just care about how they're doing in their own lives. Like the whole point of him being there is to solve this issue, right? Well, if he's doing this, then it creates so many more issues that all of a sudden it doesn't represent the best, like let's say your selfish best interest. So I can see how even plebeians who like don't benefit in the same way that senators do would still not like the fact that he does something that blatant.
But I don't want to diminish like his popular, like he's still wildly popular with Europe.
No, I'm sure,
like,
but
he's not in any.
It gets people questioning. I'm sure.
Yeah, and this is the rumblings of people starting to not like him, particularly in the Senate. Like there's a lot of questions of, is he going to try and make himself king or tyrant?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's removed. Nonetheless, Gaius continues on and passes his law now that there's no more veto because none of the other tribunes.
There's no more veto.
And it's passed. It's voted yes in the assembly because it is still a wildly popular law.
Right.
But now he's got to set up a land commission to distribute all these lands.
They actually have to do it.
Yeah. And guess who controls funding for these things? The Senate. So he goes groveling to the Senate asking for money. And his consul and his faction managed to eke out like the bare minimum funding. Like it would take them it's not achievable what they want to do with this amount of money. Basically, it puts the whole thing on hold.
Right.
Now naturally he's quite enraged by this, as you might imagine. So he responds by doing something even more controversial than removing the tribune. So a little aside, in 134 BC, the king there's a city in Anatolia. He dies. He bequeaths his kingdom and all his money to Rome. Like
to Rome.
This doesn't specify, just to Rome.
Okay, so not like a body, not a person, not a consul,
to
just Rome. Okay, to the city, I guess it could be argued.
And I'm not too sure, but I believe it's because he had a lot of children. He didn't want to see his city fall into like a big bloody succession.
So they just gave it to a foreign power.
Yeah. So Tiberius introduces a bill because you can just pass whatever you want apparently in this governmental system to appropriate that money for his land commission.
Oh, okay. So interesting.
Which pisses the Senate off because they.
I mean, does he do it because he's like, oh, well, it's to the people of Rome or something like that, or?
Well, that's his argument.
That's the argument. Okay.
By Rome, he means obviously all the people of Rome, and who better represents the people of Rome than me?
Right.
Or like my project to help the average.
Okay, I see.
It's the whole like, the Senate will squander this on meaningless crap, and I'll use it on, redistribution.
Yeah, clearly he knows better than the group of people in the Senate.
However, the Senate legally, in this case, has power over finances and foreign policy, which this clearly falls under both.
Yeah.
So very infuriated by this move. So, now they're really pissed. So they're planning to prosecute him when he leaves because they're only in office for a year and he has no immunity once he leaves. They want to prosecute him for violating the immunity of Octavian.
Okay.
By removing him, they're arguing that he is violating his immunity as a politician because he's like going after him in a way that, because you're not supposed to prosecute people or move them from office once they're out.
Okay, so you can't move them from office either.
It's like this is the legal battle that they're.
Okay.
This is the argument they're making.
Okay.
And after you can bring them up on charge of extortion, whatever you want, after they leave office. But the whole point is so you can't persecute.
That's why you want to become a governor.
Oh yeah. As we'll see, Tiberius has a good plan for this.
Good.
He fears prosecution, and I might add, I read this in an article. I don't know how true this is. I read this in an academic article somewhere that, it's very unlikely that they would have been able to prosecute him without a giant riot breaking out. So he pretty much had nothing to actually fear.
Okay.
In the sense that, like, they would have probably brought him to court, given him a slap on the wrist.
Right. Because anything more, and it would have.
Because he's like a folk hero at this point, because he's doing the land distribution.
Right.
So, like.
Populist.
Yeah, they'd fear that, heads would roll. But he either doesn't feel this way, or he's just really afraid of what might happen to him. Because he's going to be tried. When you're tried in Roman court, your jury is all senators and aristocrats.
Oh, yeah. So no matter what the sentence would be, it would be basically guaranteed.
It's almost guaranteed that he would be sentenced to something. It's just that it's unlikely he would have been given a harsh sentence. Like, it might have, I don't know what they would have.
Although I think we underestimate how, like, confident.
But at the same time, like, he's facing down, like, potential exile or execution. So, like.
Yeah, I mean, by slap of the wrist, it might just be exile, in which case there's a threat of. I don't know. I guess maybe just the unpredictability of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. That's also a theory. Like, maybe he didn't feel.
We're saying this over 2,000 years.
And we know
hindsight.
he was widely popular now. Maybe he didn't feel he had the base of support he needed for that.
Right.
Regardless, he fears prosecution. So, in order to avoid being prosecuted, he decides to commit another violation against the law of the ancestors.
We love those.
By running for tribune a second time in the following year. You don't run for...
What?
You rarely hold office more than once, and if you do, it's non-consecutive and by many
right,
years.
For consul, it's like 10 years after, right, that you're allowed?
Tribune, prior to this re-election, or this attempt at a re-election, this practice of running again had not been done for 300 years.
Oh.
There hadn't been a single tribune that tried to run for re-election in 300 years of Roman history. And people broadly assume this was just like a dead practice, and that...
Clearly, they don't need to write into law.
No, it's just like and then I wrote down in my notes. Although I'm sensing a theme here, there's technically no law outlawing this practice. So during his first vote for re-election, there was a lot, the usual campaign speeches, whatever. And he has this first vote. There's a riot that breaks out. People are angry that he's running again, and the whole thing's disrupted.
Tradition.
And the clay things they voted on are smashed, and it's like they can't do the election.
Uh-huh.
However, before all that stuff's broken, it becomes glaringly apparent that he's going to win this re-election.
He's so popular that it's just guaranteed.
But just by seeing the votes and the turnout, he's going to win re-election.
Okay.
So the Senate is losing their minds because this is they can't
like another year of this.
We can't do another year of this. So this emboldened his opposition in the Senate to act. So what happens? So there's varying accounts of this event depending on who you ask. This is kind of the watershed moment for Tiberius Gracchus in his life. I'll go with the Plutarch one first, and then I'll say the one that...
Well, first, what's Plutarch's bias here?
Plutarch is writing... He's a Greek writing in 200 AD?
Okay, so way later, yeah.
Way later, and he's writing parallel lives where he's comparing Greeks and Romans together, and he uses their lives to make moral messages. So he picks and chooses to make a point.
All right.
So it's important.
I'm assuming you'll tell us what the point is of this one after.
Well, yeah. Well, I think you'll be able to guess. But so the story, Plutarch's story, and the popular story. If you ask, if you ask them to tell you the story of Tiberius Gracchus, they'll tell you this one because it's the one that kind of made its way into legend and everything. So he's giving a big speech in the Forum right before his next re-election, and supposedly preceding the vote, he points to his head, making a gesture. If this actually happened, we don't know why he was gesturing. Some guy in the crowd who clearly doesn't like this guy goes, "Holy shit, he declared himself king," even though that's not what he said. Most likely, we don't know.
Right.
Once to the Senate, he says, "Guys, you're never going to guess. Tiberius declared himself king."
He pointed to his head.
So, naturally, the senators that opposed him were so mad, they marched out of the Senate, gathered up, because there's no weapons in Rome. It's a whole thing. You can't bring weapons in Rome.
Right.
Broke off table legs, chairs, that kind of stuff. Marched down into the Forum, and this is where the stories diverge. I'll get to that.
I mean the fog of war chaos.
What happened, what may have been the case, we will never know, was they may have just gone down to disrupt the election, like kind of what the first riot did.
Yeah, with chair legs and
just smash
table
up
legs.
Yeah, but just smash up the voting booths and intimidate people away.
Right.
But what actually happens is it ends. We don't know who killed him or what, but Tiberius Gracchus at the end is dead, and so are a few dozen.
A few dozen?
Yeah, it was a massacre.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And I might add indiscriminate killing of Roman citizens. It wasn't just Gracchians, if you will.
Well, the problem was overpopulation, right?
Yeah. The senators themselves, I can never get over this. To me, it's like the MPs of Parliament marching down to whatever squares in Ottawa and just beating another candidate to death. It's that's what happened. It's crazy. They killed this guy, and then they throw his body in the Tiber. They don't give him a proper burial. And this leads in, I don't think we have time because I want to debate a bit about Tiberius, but this leads to his brother entering politics, and his brother, Plutarch himself, says that his brother is a much more fiery and angry orator. So if that gives you an idea of what he's going to do, if this is his brother, who's supposedly the calm one,
you
can imagine he's also quite pissed that they murdered his brother in cold blood. So he enters politics later on. He's also quite important, but I don't think we have time to talk about him.
Yeah, we'll get to him another time. You'll have another time.
Well, there's a great deal of people I'd like to talk about. But yeah, so I don't know. What do you make of Tiberius and his?
I mean, I'm thinking a lot of modern parallels that I'm not really going to get into, just because populism as a concept,
Oh, people love to call him a proto-socialist, which I think is a misreading entirely of this guy.
Yeah, I mean,
you're just that's really projecting. That's presentism at its finest, being this guy's a left winger. He's in no way a left winger, if you wanted to call him that.
I mean, right and left don't even exist until the French Revolution.
Yeah, no.
But I mean, I do understand where that's coming from, at least.
Yeah, and he positions himself as
I think we should be careful not to understand things purely off of how they're identified. Like if someone says, oh yeah, it's like almost like socialist, people are gonna like stick to that part.
Yeah.
When like, no, there's a whole history there. But redistribution of like the context is completely different, right? Like, yeah, we're talking about redistribution of land, but we're talking about in a society that is like no concept of capitalism, let alone like socialism, communism, modern colonialism. Like that stuff doesn't even exist.
I think their economy could be best described as a war and slave economy, really, if you want to. I don't know what you would call that. Slaveocracy,
yeah. I mean, it's very dependent on slavery,
like looting and wars and capturing captives and stuff like that. It's quite dependent on war.
Yeah, I mean, dependency on war I don't think is unique to a system. I don't think that's what defines an economic system. It's more like how it's internally organized, for which I have nowhere near the knowledge to be argument.
Yeah, no, I don't even know.
Having an argument about what that was.
But I think it's also important to note that like he did position himself as like a popular. There's a reason he's remembered like that, and this is how I was taught.
I mean, all I'm hearing is Julius Caesar taking notes.
Well, Julius Caesar is also taking notes from every other guy that comes after him because he sets forth like a trend of these kinds of guys. He's what we would call the original populare. That term doesn't exist when he's alive, but
okay. There's
the populare and the optimates. The optimates are named after a guy who goes and kills a bunch of populares. His name's Optimate something. He's a sender. He becomes the name of the opposing faction, and it's just debated whether or not they would have called themselves that, but it's a label that's ascribed by later Roman historians, and it's useful as a distinction.
Yeah.
So the populare,
I mean, rarely is history binary like that, but
and also these people didn't really believe you can't really imagine them as like political parties. That's not how Rome works. But
no.
Broadly, people with the same
interests,
yeah, and the same group of people that support like the populare. He's almost the original populare. So there's a little truth in the fact that he's kind of a folk hero in the way that he is like appealing. We don't know how genuine he is. We can't know. He's appealing to that mass of, poor people and people who are in need.
I mean, I can see how, like, it seems like the development of a strategy, right? It's because I think Rome's unique in the sense that the way politics works, while like you said, like, there's no parties, it's the systems, especially you're talking about like traditions that aren't actually laws. It's not really a thing that we're used to as much. Like, we have traditions, but we recognize that those, especially today, we recognize that traditions aren't necessarily laws, and if they're followed to a T, it only takes one person to disrespect them, and then all of a sudden, respecting it doesn't really mean much, because then it's just giving advantage to someone else. So I find interesting, especially compared to later on, there is still some like politics as we know it today recognizable in that, not only in like populism being a strategy to win elections and all that, but even just how you gain popular support by like identifying an issue, focusing on that issue, making that everything, and then doing everything in your power for the sake of that issue being a very popular method. I mean, like a very popular method to gain support.
You know how I feel about big claims in history, right? And how they're often flawed. But you could maybe make the argument that I don't want to say that because we don't know. There's other democracies. But he's arguably the progenitor of like a party platform, basically. Because no one in Rome, at least in Rome, I'll say in Rome.
Right.
Because no one in Rome runs on, I'm going to pass this. They run on, oh, you know me from the conquest. I'm that great general. Or my family is well known.
You know that I'll do a good job.
Yeah, I don't need to tell you anything specific. Whereas he ran, I'm going to pass this specific land distribution law if you elect me. And that's like an innovation that is repeated later on.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to say like, oh, he's the first person to do X because we also have a bunch of unwritten history that
but
like...
he's the first notable, like the first one we have in written history to do that.
Yeah, I think that's significant because the thing about written history is, like you were saying, that's something that then gets replicated.
Oh yeah, his brother. You think he's a radical? His brother like wants to tear down part of the aristocracy because of what they did to him. He wants to
bring down the system.
He wants to and like again, who knows if he's benevolent or he's just a way to give himself like a soft coup
or just spite.
Yeah, or honestly, I mean, they did murder his brother in cold blood. Like I could see this, and they didn't even give him a Roman burial. They threw him in the Tiber, which is incredibly disrespectful from a religious perspective. But yeah, his brother has much more sweeping reforms than just land redistribution. It becomes a whole lot more about empowering the populares and things.
Wow. Like that. Okay.
And this tradition's carried on, in particular through like Marius. Later on, he becomes a kind of a man of the people, and then
interesting.
I think, when he runs for consul 5 times, so you start to see, like, this is the beginnings of the crack, but by the time he's there...
Right. Again, it's like, the whole terms thing not being written into law. I do see how that...
But what shocks me is no one thought, let's put it into law after this. They just keep operating as if ancestral law works.
I mean...
No one's like, oh, he's dead. Let's make it illegal to run again. They do try later, but
yes, but like at the same time, I do understand. I don't think it's a good idea at all. But I do understand the idea of like, okay, well, this, especially you're saying like, oh, someone trying to run again for.
But I guess they killed him. And that's their like way of saying you can't do this.
Well, it's not just that, but it's like, let's say there's 300 years, and then finally, oh, someone actually runs for tribune again. Something that, again, hasn't been done for 300 years. You wouldn't necessarily assume like, oh, well, this is obviously going to happen again, especially Rome, because again, Rome is not today.
Yeah,
I think
it's
and
benefit of hindsight. Like we know what happens again. So it's like,
yeah. For us, like again, like you were saying earlier about presentism.
Yeah,
I think we're also assuming, especially today, with all regulation. What was the term? It's like an aviation term. Like all regulation is written in blood.
Yeah.
Or it's like, oh, well, something happens, and then okay, we put in place a system to make sure that doesn't happen again. But I could imagine in Rome, which at least from the reading I've done, seems like a very tradition-oriented society. Like, oh, you know your seventh ancestor back, like the head of your family.
I think you're right that there's a big cultural element of. It's just how we've always done it, and like.
So
we don't need to put it into law because the respectable Romans, i.e. not Tiberius, would respect the laws of the ancestor. This is just one isolated case.
Right.
Of like
he's an anomaly.
He's a power hungry. Yeah, he's an
exactly.
Anomaly.
And as soon as you keep changing things, then in a way, he's kind of succeeded because then you've changed the system. You're like, okay, well, we can't trust tradition. Now we have to make everything into written law. And all of a sudden, the whole basis of your culture kind of collapses in on itself in a way.
And there's also something to be said for like Roman rigidity and mentality towards government, like particularly.
I mean, if you can fight against the Second Punic War with Hannibal in your lands with like, what was it, like 10% of your adult 15% of your adult male population and still being like, no, we could still fight. I think it's the sign of a people and well, maybe not a people. I don't want to say that the government represents all the people necessarily, but at least a state, a society that holds in like that's very stubborn in a way.
Yeah, and there's also we see this a lot. Like it continues on, and like they love to do this. Even people who are not so. This is a little aside again, but Sulla comes a lot later, and he's coming on the behead. Like this is after many years of all this nonsense happening in politics. Like Marius has been consul 6 times.
The gates have been opened,
including like 3 times in a row. It's like this is the Republic is falling apart. He comes back and he's saying we're gonna bring the Republic back to how it used to be. We're gonna restore tradition, even though what he does is not really what the old Republic was like. But just the fact that he knows it by appealing to the past and everything, it kind of shows that their culture is very like oriented on tradition and like just by appealing to ancestors, it gives them so much legitimacy. I think that's interesting. Even though he didn't actually restore a whole lot of the laws of the Republic, he did kind of his own thing, and that falls apart after he dies as well. But it's a whole other story. Right.
I mean, yeah, it is interesting because I think asking, oh, how did they not recognize this? How did they not see that this would happen? It's all easy to see later on. So while I do think it is an interesting discussion to be had, it's good to remind ourselves that we know what we know, they didn't,
What would you say? He was a good guy or a bad guy in history?
I mean, he didn't really get to accomplish much, so it's kind of difficult to say. It's like,
I'm feel like joking. I don't think we should be ascribing
ascribing good and bad. I think, like you're saying, isn't the most productive conversation to be had because, in my opinion, no one can ever be truly good or truly bad. People are complicated. But I do think it's interesting because I do think it's still good to evaluate the impacts of people, right? And whether those were, not good or bad, but largely positive or largely negative.
I think on large, if you want to evaluate him like that, just because his land redistribution gets effectively, he's dead in the water after he dies. All he's really done is break a bunch of Roman law, and that kind of behavior gets repeated by his brother and then several other people later. Right,
but he didn't know he was going to get murdered by senators.
Yeah, and I guess you could argue he's fighting against what people of Rome would have called arbitrary authority. The Senate is disregarding the will of the people effectively because the people wanted him to be reelected.
Right,
like he had a majority. Well, we could also argue maybe he intimidated people, bribed. We don't know. Like that's what the Senate would have said, that he would have bribed.
Also,
people.
This is all through the lens of people who wrote about this 200-300 years.
Oh, yeah, after the fact, and there's not a whole lot of archaeological evidence for what one guy was doing.
But based on the information we have in a society where what happened, and people are looking back at it, which I think is almost, which considering the fact that he died before he could do anything, I think actually matters more than what he actually did.
Because
Because especially with what we're talking about his legacy basically being what he did to achieve his goals more than his goals in themselves, that is actually what matters more.
But he is like, it's interesting though, because even in later Roman authors, he is looked upon kind of favorably. Like he's kind of seen as a martyr for the people and like kind of a Robin Hood type figure in some of the later writings.
Right. Because I mean, also, I think it is also good to mention that, like, while you're right in the sense that what he did, the inevitable impact was the breakdown of the Republic.
But he couldn't have known this happens. This is 133.
There's
BC.
that. Yeah. There's a matter of intention.
Like that's 100 years.
Whether
later.
or not that matters is another question.
Yeah.
But I mean, first of all, I think also the Senate going down and murdering a man wasn't necessarily his decision, right? Like he broke the taboo, and then their opponents took the chance to break another one. Which do you think? Actually, here's another question. Actually, which do you think would have like the most negative impact in terms of how the Republic exists as a system? Is it him, kicking out the other tribune, trying to basically take all the funds from I don't know what the Greek kingdom was called again.
It was an Anatolian kingdom. I can't remember.
An Anatolian kingdom, trying to basically confiscate that, I guess, for the sake of his...
Appropriate it. For the public good.
Appropriate it for the common good, all that.
Which, again, it's a bill that was voted on by the people, so you could also make the argument that's what the people want.
So do you think that is worse for the sake of the Republic, not putting any moral reasons? I think murder is bad. I think we both agree.
Obviously.
Right, and I think doing things for people generally is good. But just basing it off of the impact on the Republic, on how politicians operated from then on, do you think that is worse or better than going down and murdering the man who's doing all that?
That's tough because I will say prior to
No, strictly not moral anything, because then, the answer becomes...
Yeah,
the question becomes different.
But I think just because prior to this, like there were riots and stuff, but political violence was not normalized in the Republic. Like it's
right. The violence was used to overthrow the monarchy, and then ideally it would all the issues which could be solved with violence would be done through politics.
Yeah, and I will say this also becomes like the murdering, the Senate murdering people becomes a theme later on.
Right.
And arguably, I mean, this is me drawing connections again hundreds of years apart. But you could make the argument that even Sulla's prescriptions and the killing of political opponents really starts here, because before that, there's not, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm willing to hazard a guess that there was like, a senator would like pay somebody to murder one of his political rivals.
Right.
But like openly walking down to the forum and beating a man to death was frowned upon. There's a reason they didn't allow weapons in the forum and in the public spaces.
Right.
So I don't know.
Now they'll have to
but
start
at the same time,
forbidding chairs and tables.
I mean, again, this is strictly without morals. Like, because obviously killing a guy like this indefensible. They murdered also indiscriminately.
Also, a few dozen people.
Yeah,
you're saying.
which they state in the sources were not all his supporters. It was indiscriminate. They just beat people to death.
They were at the meeting, so clearly they had it coming.
Well, I think some people, clearly, but I don't know. I think because at the same time, I don't know what's more harmful, because the normalization of violence was really bad, because then that eventually turns into like raising legions against each other.
Was that a direct result of Gracchus breaking taboos in the first place, right?
Because I don't know if the Senate really got together, but we also don't know if the
for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah, I also don't really know if the Senate really got together that day with the intention of murdering him. I mean, it got out of hand. Like it may very well have been, and I would hazard a guess that, given tradition, which these guys love, they weren't going down to kill him. It was probably more like they were going in to smash the voting booths, which again is kind of not allowed in Roman law.
Right, but you don't...
Which isn't explicitly not allowed in Roman law. But
yeah.
But I no doubt they got down there. The supporters got mad. It got into a fight, and then it devolved into them killing all these people.
But that's the thing, though. Also, like...
I don't know who's ultimately responsible. It's kind of a tough...
Like, I don't know. Let's just picture this in our minds, right? In today's world. I don't know if Roman people at that time were fragile or whatever. I doubt it. Definitely doubt it, especially back then.
A lot of them are retired soldiers, if you think about it. A lot of those guys were like they fought in the Punic Wars and stuff, so they're probably some pretty tough guys.
Right. But like, I mean, speaking of, now that you're saying that soldiers actually, maybe PTSD, unrecognized at the time, obviously played a part in the sense
that's an interesting. I wonder if anyone's done a study of all these Roman figures to see if you could like discern. But again, the accounts of
you can't discern anything because there's no first person accounts,
and also the accounts of individual lives are so embellished, and they would never mention like.
But like I don't know, because I'm trying to picture, right? Like let's say, I don't know, we're university students, so I know they're politicians or whatever, but let's just say Okay, well, then let's just compare it to politicians. Let's say the Canadian Parliament.
We're doing a little bit of speculative history right now.
Speculative history. Let's say.
Just bear with us, you know?
There's a meeting outside, something regarding a bill, whatever. Let's just say the Senate. The unelected Senate, and then the Senate. Parliament, the House of Commons is like doing something that like people don't like.
Because it's basically the Assembly is like the Parliament, and if you will, and the Senate
right.
is the Senate.
It's not the perfect analogy, but let's just go with that. The House of Commons, they decide to do, let's just say, redistribute land.
Yeah,
redistribute Canadian land
by taking it from U.S. allies.
All right, and the senators, for whatever reason, are just like pissed, and they're like, okay, well, walk down there. And we'll just give them a piece of our mind. We're gonna take chairs. We're gonna break stuff, whatever. But
we're gonna interrupt. But what they're doing is they're trying to interrupt his re-election. It's more like if, let's say, we don't have laws preventing people from running again, but it's like if in the U.S. like the president tried to run for the third term.
Okay, but like you break stuff. Well, I don't know, because now I'm trying to. I'm comparing this to January 6th now, which I don't know if I want to get into the more political discussion, but we're talking about political violence. Parallels can be made to the modern world, especially with what I'm trying to doing. But you go down to break things. What would it take for, let's say you're one of the people, or I'm one of the people. We go there. What would need to happen for us as a group to be like, okay, we're gonna bash your head in? Not only like if it was just Tiberius,
it could maybe be like, targeted killing. Like they'd be like, to kill indiscriminately.
Like I'm going to this thought exercise not because I'm thinking it's like, absolutely impossible. I'm legitimately trying to put myself in the shoes of these people,
in the sandals of the Romans,
in the Romans, in their togas,
in the togas, in a Roman. Walk a mile in another man's toga.
I'm thinking, if you go there with the intention to stop something, Tiberius is like, no, this is going to happen, being his stubborn self. And the senators being there aren't going to stop him, and obviously he has this group of supporters around him. So he's like, well, what are you going to do? And then one guy who's got a little something broken in his head.
One of the senators or one of the supporters who's like, or maybe one of the veterans who's just like, just shaking.
Yes,
he's remembering Carthage all over again.
Exactly, he's remembering fighting the Numidian or with whatever was happening at the time, and let's say you kill him, right? Just out of this very emotional reaction because he's disrespecting all this. We hate him with like down to our very being, down to our core. Like he is. Not only he's the antithesis to the system as it has existed for the last few centuries.
Yeah, since
and especially being in a culture that cares so much about tradition, about your forefathers, about what has been done to build this republic.
I think we can't forget too that it's not an entirely like self-interested, cynical reaction. I think a lot of them, because there's the element of they don't want to lose their power because they might have perceived him as threatening, but I think a lot of these people really did feel that strongly about
it. Seems emotional, right? Like it would need to be emotional.
Because if they were smart about this, they would have just killed him, like hired a guy to go out and like kill him.
It doesn't seem especially if you're doing it with chairs and stuff.
It's not calculated. They marched out like it was an on the spot decision. So I think it might have actually been like
it might have been semi-organized, especially at the output of we're gonna walk down there and get him.
Well, I'm sure some guy got up and was like, we can't have this. Gave a big speech. I think there it's known who did that, but I can't remember his name. There is a senator I think who gave a speech.
Then there you go. So it seems like they're all riled up as well. It's not just a purely
we're gonna
strategic decision.
No, they're pissed.
So in my head, I'm thinking what most likely happened is either Tiberius or some other person who might have been like, "What are you doing, pushing back?" And then things just start being thrown. I think. At first I was like, how does it happen that like a few dozen people, whatever? But now that I'm thinking about it, if you kill someone at an assembly like that, it wouldn't just be one.
No, and it would devolve into like a brawl. I think, like people trying to run away and getting
exactly. Because I imagine they didn't just go into the entrance and just bash the first person they saw.
Can you imagine?
I hope that's not what happened.
I love that because that's kind of the Plutarch telling, right? Is that
that's the impression that's given to me from the way things are described. It's just like, so they went there. And dozens were dead.
Because the Plutarch telling is like, they went because he declared himself king, which probably didn't happen. It's an embellishment. But they just went in there and just like the first guy they saw whacked him over the head with a chair. When it's probably more of like it probably escalated, I would imagine.
Because like that.
Or there's some nutso in the Senate. Who knows?
Right. Again, this is not history that we're doing right now. It's just pure speculation.
We're speculating based on our limited sources. Yeah.
Exactly. And I like to think about history in this way sometimes. Because it
helps me
people. Exactly. It helps me make sense of what happened. Because the issue is that if we're just reading it, we're just like, murder. I can't believe people would do that. Like,
people in the past, man. And then I'm like, but holy shit, that's like a messed up thing to do. Like, you got to be in some state of mind, or like have like a mob like situation breakout, like what you think happened,
that's why I think it makes more sense to me now what happened. Because if I put myself in those shoes, try to have the same, like think of myself as having the same cultural values that they had at the same time, then I don't think it would just been one person, because it wasn't a planned assassination. It wasn't we're going to go there, we're going to bash one guy, we're going to get out. It was pure anger. this is terrible. These people are terrible. Not only that, but he has support from the people. We should go down there, give him a piece of our mind as a group so that, power in numbers kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They go in, they probably start arguing with people. They get further inside. And
they try and
again, like you said, disrupt, break things, whatever.
They just want to stop the election or whatever. They're like, you can't do this.
Yeah, it just takes one. Maybe again it's Tiberius because he's trying to make himself king. And last time there was a king, they killed him.
Or maybe it's a senator.
Did they kill him? No, he got exiled.
I think so. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that.
Whatever. People like him because
I'm good with the Republic onward. Everything before and after that.
Right.
I'm good with the Republic. That's my.
So yeah. Okay. Anyway, I wasn't really trying to make a point. I was just trying to see, if we get ourselves into that headspace, can we make sense of that event? And I think I actually can now. Because, especially in that situation where there's a bunch of violence, when you're fearing for your life, again, these are veterans as well. Most
of these guys are, veterans of the war. And even the senators all served in the army.
Were there any casualties among the senators? Did Plutarch describe anything like that?
It just says Roman citizens, and I don't think so, because they would have explicitly mentioned if senators had died.
Right, because that seems...
But it's framed...
It would have been more significant.
But it's framed like a massacre, that's the thing. It's not framed like a brawl where, some senators are killed.
But also this is, a few hundred years later, so I guess it's, far removed.
But I do wonder, that's a good question. I never read about senators.
Because then it would change things in my head. Because if it was a brawl where, let's say... Even if it's some senators were injured or whatever, and then they had a very disproportionate response, is it a thing where, some senators were killed, and because these people are of higher esteem, they retaliated also again disproportionately? Or was it you got one guy, or you got punched in the face once, and you're like, all right,
let's kill this guy.
I have a chair in my hand, time to bash some skulls.
But I think it also might be because, again, Plutarch is moralizing, and this is most of our information about Tiberius comes from Plutarch. And Plutarch is moralizing, and he wants to make a point about...
What is that point anyway? I don't think I was super clear on that.
I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read Plutarch, but I want to say, because this is just going off the fact that I know the declaring himself king, I think he wants to make a point about populist tyrants.
About demagoguery.
In that case, it makes sense for him to say that none of the senators were killed. Because he's almost framing it like it's... I don't know if he's framing it like it's righteous, but
righteous justice.
Yeah, or something.
Not righteous. Especially if we don't know that he killed himself.
I'm operating from memory there. I haven't read Plutarch.
What I'm wondering is he framing it as a tragedy or a righteous? But
maybe he's framing it like a because
I think it's a necessary tragedy, maybe.
Or maybe it's
not necessary, but it's
look what happens when you enable these people.
Yeah. It is purely a tragedy.
But it is weird. I don't know. I'm gonna look that up. Maybe someone has said if there's senators that died, because that would change.
I
the whole
imagine that's
equation.
Also probably a point of discussion. Is what was actually the conclusion that he wanted people to get out of the telling of that tale? Because, again, that's just the way he's framing it, so it doesn't give us as much information about what Tiberius did as we'd like, but I do find it interesting how that's spun. Because I think right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into the headspace of them, trying to really understand what did they do, while Plutarch, the person who we know this from, has a very specific agenda, which is a bit counterintuitive, but you work with what we can.
I don't think there's any explicit mention of senators. It just says Roman citizens, so that could include senators because they are.
So it's ambiguous,
and it does say indiscriminate killing. It's framed like that's how it's
a tragedy. It's not a righteous killing.
But I think he's not necessarily saying that no one died. It's just it doesn't matter. The Roman citizens died. That's the important part. It might be that kind of framing.
Okay,
but again, that's the specific translation. I'm not a Plutarch expert.
You're not a Plutarchian.
No, I did read specifically his interpretation of Gaius and what's his brother's name? Tiberius' life. I think I've been calling him Gaius this whole time. This is Tiberius, to be clear. I may have called him Gaius once or twice. I get confused.
I think you said Tiberius.
Gaius is his brother.
You've been saying Tiberius, I'm pretty sure. I think you've been calling his brother Tiberius.
I'd love to talk about Gaius sometime. He's again, Plutarch considers him to be fiery and hot-headed, while his brother was cool and calm, and his brother is like this. So, but he was a much bigger, had much bigger plans for his tribune, and he was riding on that martyrdom.
The power of his anger was a strong one.
Well, and he was riding on the martyrdom of his brother and these pissed off people that, because he gets elected right after, basically, and not long after his brother is murdered.
Wasn't it was it Lenin's brother who got killed by the Tsars?
I don't know. Probably.
I'm trying to think of
parallel.
Other people inspired by the deaths of siblings.
There's not going to be a monarch where that's happened. Maybe not actually.
Oh, that's probably happened many times.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's if you didn't marry them. Sorry, that's Egypt specifically.
Yes,
sibling marriage.
The Ptolemies. We might talk about them sometime too.
Yeah, I'm sure. There's so many things to talk about in this new thing that we're trying to do.
I don't. Do you have any final thoughts on Tiberius? I think I've kind of said everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, we got good time on this. It's definitely a topic that can be discussed a lot more. I think it is something that it's interesting, like you were saying before about it being the first written example of like populism.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe Athens has like demagogues and stuff.
If I wanted to, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. I would say though that if you want to take anything away from his life,
at least within Rome, that's the example that was used for later developments. That's a more substantial way to put it.
He's like the archetype of a populist, and
right, he's the archetype. That's a good way to put it.
Like his violating of the norms, I can't emphasize this enough, becomes repeated. Like he's the first guy to do this, and this becomes a huge trend in Rome politics until the fall of the Republic. So much so that a lot of authors argue that it's why the Republic fell, is that people just started not giving a shit about what the law said.
All right, then here's a question. Actually, I have kind of final thoughts, half question. Do you think this was inevitable?
That like someone was going to do it?
Yeah,
I think he's just a guy, and I think in a sense he was acting like, I think if there hadn't been Tiberius Gracchus, there would have been another guy who would have came along and realized that he could pass legislation by violate. I think it was just the way the government structured. Eventually, someone's going to realize that it doesn't actually say I can't do this, and
right, it doesn't take a genius necessarily to figure it out.
And I think if he hadn't done it, some other demagogue would have done it, just because the conditions were perfect for a populist to rise. There's all these angry people that are poor and they're in the city. You know, like I think
the conditions were ripe at that time.
But,
it's
again,
just yeah.
I'm also like the kind of history I ascribe to, and if I had to ascribe to a school, isn't like great man theory or anything. So I'm like,
me neither.
But I think that's a pretty common conception in modern, that the trends are more important than people.
Of course, and I do agree that I think that would have happened. I mean,
there's the occasional person I will say did something really bad.
Because the thing is also there is a question of like, is it necessary for like such big disturbances to happen, or was reform possible at one point? Was it possible for someone to not as extreme as that to gently nudge the Republic in that direction? Which again, that's alternate. We're getting to alternate history at that point.
I don't know,
but I think it's an interesting question in the sense that do you think the conditions were unmovable, right? Which I guess again we don't really know because we weren't there.
Do you mean like if he had never violated the law of the ancestors at all? Like, I
don't even necessarily think him specifically, but like,
or anybody.
Yeah, because do you think that the fact that there was a system which there was traditions that weren't laws that you could in theory just break and people couldn't really do anything? Do you think that could have been changed without such like a violent event?
I think I don't know, without a violent event.
Well, it changed. I don't know if it was changed after that, but I mean like,
do you
think that necessarily would have stayed?
I think so, because even following all this, they don't codify these laws until much later. Like they just assume that he's he's just, it's always they're always an exception. And also in general, I will say the Senate in particular is very resistant to any kind of change to the government because they think their government is perfect. That's their whole thing.
Okay, so, yeah, I think
that's
at
the
that
Polybian
point
theory of like we're balancing all kinds of governments here. Like they do change things like the composition of the Senate and juries, but fundamentally the way their society is organized to them is like they don't want to.
So there's a very strong argument for the idea that
someone would have done it, and
it would have been that like extreme and violent. Because
I don't think there's any
reform would have like not been taken seriously.
Well, like you mean like the land redistribution, or
yeah, I'm thinking specifically about land redistribution because that was his goal, right? That was like the other things that he did were
in
a
service
means
of
to an end.
Land redistribution, yeah.
And
I mean, we don't know. Like he might have really believed that he was going to solve this problem, and
he seemed pretty committed to it.
Yeah,
to be fair, like he wasn't the type of person who used that to get elected and then rested on his laurels, right?
Yeah, but people also like again, the Senate would have argued, and I'm just taking the position of a senator. The Senate would have argued he's using this to empower himself and then overthrow the Republic. I don't think either of those extremes are true. It might have been a little bit of both. He wants.
That's what they told themselves to murder him.
Yeah, I mean that's their justification. And I mean, I know he wants to get ahead in politics. That's just a thing you do in Roman society when you're rich.
Yeah. What else?
But I think he genuinely did want this passed, or otherwise, why would he go through all this effort of breaking the law and potentially being prosecuted and everything?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting question.
I don't know if you could have passed land reform because that was really, really controversial amongst the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, because you said like they gave him like a little bit of money, but it was money that was
they did it
not even close. So they could follow the law without.
Well, so they could say we're not like impeding the process. We just don't have enough money this year. Basically, they're just like not allocating him enough money because they don't want people to say like, oh, the Senate is obstructing. They can just point and say, well, we gave him money. That land commission, goes on for a really long time, by the way, and it's revived a couple times. Land redistribution is a huge point of contention.
Right, because wasn't that like Caesar's whole thing as well?
Yeah, and later on, Italian citizenship, like the citizenship for all people in Italy, becomes a huge issue that people campaign on. And again, people start campaigning on issues. Like there's people who campaign on Italian citizens.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we were talking about like the specific goals and stuff, but like it is interesting how the fundamental idea of campaigning on an issue is
like very new and
is so new.
And it works so well that people adopt that. Like,
which I think that is interesting because I do see how that in itself is such an important development when it comes to like deconstructing the republic as it is. Because if you're in a system where tradition is basically law, then it makes sense that you have like people who just trust that they run things about a specific issue because there's no expectation that they would attain a specific thing, because then they'd be like, oh, is there a tradition where it doesn't happen? Oh, well, then that's the tradition. As a good leader, that's what I do, is I follow the rules of our forefathers. And as soon as someone's like, I will stop at nothing for the people to get this thing done,
it's a big upturn. And
then all of a sudden there's a large motivation to ignore that quote unquote law, right? The law, the unspoken law. Or I mean the unwritten law.
The law of the ancestors.
It is spoken a lot.
It is spoken constantly by senators.
Exactly. Unspoken is completely the wrong adjective.
I'm sure it's a cultural thing. I'm just still baffled that they never really. I mean, they might. I'm sure they tried to codify it later, but my instinct. But again, I'm not a Roman. After this would be to like, okay, like clearly people are going to try this. We got to put this into law. If I wanted to maintain the republic as it was, but maybe they thought like you said, like he's an isolated incident. He's like upstart, and by killing him, who's gonna try that again?
Exactly. We've shown what happens when people do that. They get a chair to the face.
His brother.
But then, but especially I'm thinking after his brother then becomes a bigger deal. Like, it's 1, then 2, then.
Which, by the way, little spoiler here. They deal with him in much the same way. They send. This is when the Optimates and the Populari get their name.
Oh.
The guy, the Senator Optimus or something, like I think it's Optimus.
Optimus Prime.
Yeah, I think it's Optimus. He hates the Populari. He's like he's a stereotypical old money, like not like aristocrat.
Right.
And they send him after Gaius. Well, he puts a bounty on the guy's head. He's like, oh, we'll give you his head's weight in gold if you kill him. So it's like very overt even by then.
Yeah, wow.
And there's just like a little tidbit that I find interesting is the guy who does kill him fills his head with lead.
Oh.
And the guy knows it, but he's like, oh, I don't care. And he just pays him like the value of that and gold. I mean, that guy made out well in the end.
Yeah, and all he did was to murder one guy.
But that's a straight up massacre because they go after them.
Well, that shows the difference, right? I mean,
it escalates so fast after that.
Yeah, I mean, just the nature of how they died shows the difference in the Republic that it makes, because Tiberius, like...
He's declared
Well, I mean, Tiberius, the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Tiberius is killed in, like, a massacre or whatever, but
like an emotional, like, spur of the moment. But
exactly.
Gaius is declared an enemy of the state, which means that anyone can kill him. He's the first guy who gets declared that. Like, he basically forfeits his rights as a citizen, and anyone can murder him. And, which leads to, Sulla's prescriptions later on is a very, very much echoes that of, oh, if you kill them, you get to keep all their land. Which, again, I have no time to talk about this, but... I have to give an aside to this. This is the most insane thing I ever read in a book. Was that Sulla? What would happen is that he put out a prescription for all his enemies after there's a civil war. He takes over Rome,
right?
And whoever kills him gets to take their land. And that list grows bigger and bigger every day. He promises 12 people originally, and then every day more people get added to the list. But it like fucks the Roman economy because people like will kill people. Like it becomes a job to go out and hunt the guys on the prescription list.
They invented bounty hunters,
or they just like lie and say they killed the guy and they didn't to try and get his land. It's like a whole. It's a horrible time. I think a few thousand people are killed in those prescription killings.
Jeez. Well, yeah, I think it'd be a good idea to stop there.
Before I go on a tangent about all of Roman history.
That, and so we can leave each other more subjects.
Yeah,
for later on.
I reveal all my hand. Yeah.
But well, thank you for that. That was an incredible story.
Yeah, it was great. I love talking about it. I'm very excited to see what you bring next or the week after.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
But yeah, so I hopefully this is a good setup. I think as a first one, this works really well. I think again, it was a very, very good story. A lot to talk about, and hopefully we'll have
many more.
many more. Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you ideally next week. Bye.
Bye.